This week we discussed proving to others and ourselves that we can remain sober, using metaphors from current events, and staying out of legal trouble. The first thing we're going to discuss is proving to others and, more importantly, yourself that you can remain sober.
So like I said, the first thing that we're going to talk about for this week's blog post is that we would like to prove to others and, more importantly, ourselves that we can remain sober. And one of the first things that comes to my mind when I consider this is that motivation comes from action. And what that means is that once we start doing things, we're going to be more apt to continue doing them. Now that might seem a little odd to a lot of people because they might think that in order to do things or do actions, you have to be motivated. But if you have suffered from mental health issues, you know that being motivated isn't always the case. So what I have found is that by making myself do things, I start to get this snowball effect and start to become motivated. So when I first started getting back into working out, it took a lot of effort for me to get there. But once I was there, I felt better about doing it, and I wanted to keep doing it. It wasn't always easy to get there, but once I was there, my motivation increased, and the action that I took to get there made me motivated to keep doing it. Can use more simple examples like making the bed in the morning. You get up, you start to do one productive thing, and then oftentimes you can see that you'll want to continue to do productive things. If you want to consider this in more of a scientific kind of term or way, you can consider Newton's first law of action, which states that anything in motion will continue in motion until it's acted upon by something of equal force. So basically, why I'm bringing that into that is because once you start doing something, unless something comes up that's as significant or more significant, you're going to continue to do that thing. So once you're motivated and start doing something that you're motivated about, and you've taken the action to start doing it, you're going to stay in motion. And that's scientifically proven by Isaac Newton. So if you've got a scientific mindset, you can consider that. The next thing I consider when I think about how we'd like to prove to ourselves and others that we can remain sober is that I'm sure if you're like me, you have probably hurt some people along the way, or done things that you're not very proud of. There's things you probably regret, and you've probably said before that you are going to stop partaking in whatever you're doing, and you have been unable to. And a lot of people might start to think that you're not capable of doing so, and that's their right. But what better way to prove them wrong than to remain sober and prove to them that you've got this? And how good are you going to feel when you every day can say, hey, I understand that I might have done some bad things in the past, but that's not me anymore, and I'm taking action to overcome those things. So there's nothing I can do about what I've done in the past except for to be a living legacy for myself and try not to do that anymore by remaining sober. So that, I think, is a very powerful way to think about that. And the final thing I think about when I think about remaining sober, by thinking about proving other people right and wrong, is that there are people that believe in us. And to me, that's more important because I have so much support and so many people that believe in me that I really want to show them that I can do this and that I'm doing it not only for myself but for them. I think that all the support that I've gotten has really helped me to remain sober, and I think that it's a testimony to them that what they're doing and their goodwill and their prayers and their thoughts and their support, no matter how it comes, is helping. And the best way I can say thank you to them is by proving them right. I can remain sober.
We will now discuss metaphorically speaking, using current events and circumstances as our muse.
So the next thing we're going to talk about is metaphorically speaking, using current events and circumstances as your muse. And what I'm talking about here is using current events to think outside of the box and maybe use them as distractions or whatever you think you can do to help them overcome the symptoms you're experiencing in terms of addiction or mental health. So the current event that I'm going to speak about is the coronavirus, because that, I think, is probably one of the most salient things, and I think that it's probably affecting everyone that is listening to this this video. So when I say coronavirus, I would ask you to kind of consider what you think, and I would think that I would think about how it's wreaked havoc on everyone's lives. I would think about how it's devastated lives. I would think about how everyone is talking about it wherever I go. Everyone has a different opinion about how it should be handled. Basically, I would remember that it's pretty much had a pretty dramatic impact on the way I'm living right now. So now you might wonder where a muse plays in and how that ties into the current events and the whole idea. I'm going to explain that to you guys. A muse is something that causes us to think deeply about a specific person or a thing or a situation, whatever have you. And it sometimes can be a source of inspiration for an artist, an author, or a poet. So in this instance, I found myself thinking deeply about the current events and circumstances and was inspired. So basically, I was using our current events, such as the coronavirus, as my muse. And what happened was, like I said, I started to get inspired, and I started to think about some metaphors, and we're going to talk about that. But for now, you might wonder, well, how can such a dreadful experience be inspiring? And that is a very good question. That is where the metaphorically speaking piece comes in. So as I was deep in thought about our current events and circumstances, I began to compare them to a person who suffers from addiction or mental health issues. So now we're going to talk about that metaphor. And within that metaphor, I would like you to consider yourself a person with addiction issues or mental health issues as a world, and your addiction as the coronavirus. So in this metaphor, you, a person with an addiction, are the world, and the coronavirus is your addiction. So with that in mind, consider this this little scenario. Up until your addiction manifested, you were living a pretty manageable life. Maybe you had some bad breaks, but everyone goes through bad breaks, and you were always able to get by and continue on with your life. Then slowly you started experiencing some pretty terrible circumstances. You began feeling the symptoms of withdrawal. You started waking up with cravings from the source of your addiction. You maybe couldn't go to sleep without indulging in your source of addiction. It'd be at this point in your life that it was getting pretty difficult, but you were still able to manage your life and get by. And then boom, something bad happens, something catastrophic, something dramatic, something like you lose your job, you get arrested, you lose custody of your children, things like that. So you can see at this point in the metaphor, I'm comparing how an addiction manifests to how the coronavirus manifested in our world. So with that in mind, I want you to keep that in mind, and we're going to continue with the scenario. Now your addiction has wreaked havoc on your life. It is the main cause of your devastation. Wherever you go, whatever you do, it is always on your mind. You hear everyone telling you different things about your addiction. Some people judge you. Some people encourage you. Others ignore you. But almost everyone tells you need to quit. Regardless, your addiction has impacted the circumstances of your life dramatically. Now you can't drive, see your children, or go to work. Again, I'm comparing the impact that the coronavirus has had on the world to the impact that our addiction has had on our lives. So continuing on with the metaphor, I'd like us to consider what we can do now that our life has been devastated by our addiction, just like the world has been devastated by the coronavirus. And considering that, I'm going to suggest that we do what the world has done. The world has taken action. The world hasn't waited around for the coronavirus to ruin it. the world has not ignored the symptoms. The world has sought help. People within the world are avoiding risky situations. People are doing research. People are asking opinions of other people that have gone through similar situations or have experienced the coronavirus. People that are getting through this are focusing on the positives in life and keeping faith and hope. So what I would suggest is doing these same things within our recovery. Just like the world, we have experienced adversity before, but maybe not to this magnitude. Just like the world, however, we won't give up. It's not. This hasn't won yet. It has been pretty devastating, but there are things that we can continue to do and are doing to overcome.
So the last thing we're going to discuss is staying out of legal trouble.
So the last thing we're going to talk about this week is related to staying out of legal trouble. And I don't have too much to say about it because it's pretty self-evident, but I did want to touch on it. And part of what I wanted to talk about was the main source of my legal trouble that I've experienced, which is OWIs. I've had a few now, and approximately 1.5 million drivers get arrested a year for driving under the influence, and I've been very fortunate that I haven't hurt anybody, and that I haven't had consequences that I haven't been able to overcome. However, I do believe that sooner or later that is what would happen, and that is one of the reasons that I really need to stop doing that. You know, it's not a healthy thing to do, to drive while I'm impaired and put other people and myself in danger. And on top of that, getting in legal trouble is very, very expensive. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars in within the legal situations I've gotten in due to my addiction. I also haven't gotten in any legal trouble other than a few speeding tickets when I was a teenager, but I haven't gotten in any legal trouble that hasn't involved alcohol. So with that being said, I think that for me, I have a lot to look forward to in life, and being in legal trouble kind of puts a big damper on all of that. Like I said, it costs a lot of money. It's cost me a lot of freedom, a lot of resources. I've lost a lot of opportunities because of the legal trouble I've gotten into. So basically what I'm saying is that by remaining sober, I stand a very, very good chance of staying out of legal trouble and avoiding those hassles in the future. And if you haven't been in any legal trouble, I commend you. That makes me very happy. I don't want to see people go through that kind of thing. But I will say that if you continue in your addiction, that there's a good chance that sooner or later it's going to happen. And I just hope that, that you can avoid that by remaining sober, because like I said, at least for me, I don't experience any issues legally when I'm sober. It only happens when I'm in active addiction. So that's something I wanted to point out. And if you are experiencing legal trouble as well, remaining sober will help you get over that faster, and you'll get the best results by remaining sober, because continuing in an active addiction, at least in my experience, while in those legal circumstances, only intensifies and makes things worse legally. So remaining sober will help us stay out of legal trouble. So this week we have discussed proving to others, and more importantly ourselves, that we can remain sober. We've discussed, metaphorically speaking, how we can use current events to remain sober, and we've discussed how remaining sober can help us stay out of legal trouble. I hope that everyone enjoyed this week's video from Today You Can. This is the first video, so take it easy on me. I do plan on making some edits and doing things differently, or however I see fit going forward. But I did want to get this video out to everybody this week. So I really do hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys next time.